Okay, in this chess lecture, I want to cover common chess mistakes that new players make. But first I want to cover a concept of the point value of the pieces, or what the pieces are worth. The pieces are not all worth the same. Some are more valuable than others. And here's a little chart here, okay? So, effectively, the pawn, right here, the pawn is worth 1 point, okay? And the knight is worth 3 points, or you can think about it as 3 pawns. And a bishop is worth 3 points, or 3 pawns. A rook is worth 5 points, or 5 pawns. And a queen is worth 9 points, or 9 pawns. So, obviously the queen is more valuable. The queen is more valuable than the rook. The rook is more valuable than the knight. And knights or bishops are effectively equal to each other. And pawns are obviously not as worth as much as any other piece. Okay, so that means if you only had a king and rook versus king and bishop, technically you would have a better piece than your opponent. And one of the ways you can tell that you're winning at chess, I'm sorry I keep putting that down there or putting it off the screen. One of the ways you can tell that you're winning at chess is to count the point values of the pieces that you have versus what your opponent has. So let's say that you had captured knight, or you have captured your opponent's. So let's say you're playing white and you have a black knight and a black pawn, but your opponent has one of your rooks. Okay, now technically you would have a knight and pawn, so 3 plus 1 is 4, and your opponent has 5. So technically your opponent is ahead by 1 point, or you could say a pawn. Okay, so what you want to try to do is capture. One of the strategies in chess is to capture as much of your opponent's chess pieces as possible. Okay, so if you could capture a rook and only give up, and give your opponent your bishop, you would be ahead. So let me just cover this thing of, capturing, or let me cover the common mistakes that I'm going to cover in this lecture. Well, here's the ones I want to cover. One is moving too fast. They usually tell new players, almost sit on your hands. Don't make very quick moves. You want to think about your moves, okay? I mean, don't take 20 minutes to make a move, but unless, you're an advanced player, with tons of time, or you have, 2 hours to make all your moves, but, just don't make instant moves. You want to look around to see if you can find what's the best move. And number 2, the other common mistake is not guarding your chess pieces, and I'm going to go into that in more detail. And the third one is not castling. Believe it or not, castling is a very important thing. And I put king safety, because if you think about it, the object of chess is to capture the opponent's king. So you always want to make sure your king is safe. And one of the best ways to do this is by castling. And maybe if I just go back to the chess screen. Now here, black is castled. Okay? And you can see that he has this line of pawns. Okay? This king is pretty safe. Okay? So, this little setup here, the king is very safe. But down here, white is not very safe. It doesn't really have any. It does have some pawns protecting it, but it hasn't castled, or we can say it probably did not castle, because maybe this rook is gone. It's hard to tell. Maybe the king did castle, and then he lost this rook. But these pawns, that's another thing about the king's safety. That's why I say castling is the safest thing. And then making your king safe. And one of the best ways to make it safe is to have sort of this wall of pawns, or what they call the pawn shield, around your king. And white's pawn shield is gone, so this white king is actually much more vulnerable to attack than the black king. And of course, what you want to do is checkmate the enemy king. So now let's go back to these items. We've covered don't move too fast, take your time, think about it, castle when possible, don't delay it. Now what about guarding your pieces? Let me go into that in more detail. Well, guarding your pieces is making sure that there's another chess piece on the board that can capture it in case it's captured. And maybe here's an example, this knight right here. You know, let's say if this black knight wanted to capture it, we could just capture right back. Okay? So this white knight is actually protected by this pawn. And actually this white knight is also protected by this knight over here. So it's protected. Okay? And likewise, you know, if we can just keep going down, you know, technically this white pawn right here is protected by this white pawn. And actually, it's, if you don't know, it's actually indirectly protected by the queen too. So, and also the other piece protecting this white pawn is this knight right here. Okay? So we can find many examples like this on the chessboard where the pieces, you know, the chessman, if it was captured, could be captured by one of ours, so we're not losing pieces. You don't want to lose pieces, because like I said, that's what you want to do. You want to capture your enemy pieces. So, now look at this example. This bishop is not protected. There's no other white chess piece that's protecting it, so it's under attack by the enemy queen. It can be easily be captured. If it was black's turn, it could come down and capture this bishop effectively for free. You'd have a bishop, and you don't want that at all. Okay? So are there any black pieces that can be captured for free? You know, if it was, say, it was white's turn, the answer is no. You know, let me look at, let's say we want to capture, you know, this knight right here. Well, technically black could recapture this, you know, with this pawn or with this knight, so that knight is well protected. Now, one thing I want to cover is that sort of the relative value of the pieces. So, you know, if we were to capture this knight again, you know, black could just recapture with its knight, and effectively you've just traded off knights. So no one has actually won any points or any chessmen. You both have taken each other's knight. But there's an example on the board of, let's say it was white's turn, could actually come down here and capture this rook, and then let's say the king is going to recapture. Now remember we said that the bishop is worth 3 points and the rook is worth 5, so technically, you know, this piece is more valuable than the others. And you know, in chess, it's usually not always a good idea, but it can be a very good idea to capture your opponent's more valuable pieces with less valuable pieces. So, you know, probably white would be very interested in capturing this rook. So we just take it, and the king would take back, and the bishop's worth 3, the rook's worth 5, so technically white has gone up by 2 points or 2 pawns, and it would be ahead. Okay? So this is what I mean by sort of guarding your pieces and capturing your opponent's more valuable pieces. But realistically, I wanted to focus on guarding your pieces. So here, this is not very good for white. You don't want to leave your pieces unprotected. But it looks like the rest of white's pieces are relatively protected. Well, this technically nothing protects this pawn here. Okay? So these are the unprotected pieces in white's, you know, these are white's unprotected pieces. Now, does black have any unprotected pieces? Yes, it actually does. It actually has this bishop over here. This is what I'm talking about. This is what you don't want to be doing. Now, it's okay. Sometimes you have to move a piece towards not... No, actually, I'm wrong. The knight is actually protecting this one. So I will take that back. Then this knight is actually protecting this bishop, and I cannot find a piece in black's, you know, in black's, none of black's pieces are unprotected. All of them are protected. You know, the queen is being protected by, you know, this pawn, and the queen is protecting these 2 pawns. These knights are sort of protecting each other. the king is sort of protecting these three pawns, and the rook is protecting this pawn, and so on and so forth. So black really has no pieces that are unguarded, and this is what you want to do. Don't be leaving pieces unguarded in chess.